A lot of attention is paid to what to do after an act of aggression or violence, and often that involves more aggression and violence. We need to pay more attention to how to prevent aggression and violence. As everyone knows, aggression and violence are very common. Here in 2013, a woman was tortured and burned alive because she was practicing what was called sorcery. This was in Papua New Guinea, but of course, situations like this occur all over the world. Here, for example, in 2015 in New Delhi, India, 5 women killed by a mob who accused them of practicing witchcraft. This kind of aggression and violence comes from the way people think and the way they've been taught to think in their society and taught to act towards others. And of course, this year we've seen an increase in aggression and violence because of societal factors like police brutality, racism, rioting, unemployment, the various things that are going on within the society. If we want to prevent acts of aggression and violence, we first have to understand what types of aggression there are and what are the causes of aggression. So let's look at that. The father of peace and conflict studies is Johann Galtung, and many years ago he gave us what is called the violence triangle or the aggression triangle, which shows us 3 different kinds of violence. One is direct violence. That's the stuff that's obvious, so we see it all the time. But underneath that is structural violence. This is what's embedded into our social structures, and under that is cultural violence. These are the beliefs that we have in a society, like racism, that leads to structural kinds of problems that leads then to direct violence. So we need to think about direct violence has underpinning causes, like in the structure of the society, the laws, the rules, and so on. And then structural violence has something under that, the opinions, the values of people. We need to change those if we're going to prevent violence. One type of violence that pretty much everybody experiences is impulsive aggression or emotional aggression. This is when we have strong emotions, usually anger. It's not planned in advance. It happens in the heat of a moment. And this is due to our brain's response to threat. This involves 2 parts of the brain called the amygdala and the hypothalamus, which help with what is called the fight or flight response. And this leads often to violence or aggression. A quite different type of aggression is instrumental or predatory, which is aggression to achieve a goal, a means to an end. So a person wants to obtain money or drugs or a car, and they harm someone in order to achieve that end. This is instrumental aggression, very different from emotional aggression. Another category of aggression is called relational aggression, aggression within a relationship. This is when we are intimidating or threatening or bullying or teasing someone or verbally berating them. Your words have power. Your words can hurt, so use them wisely. Next, let's look at some of the factors that influence aggression, that cause aggression. I will list biological factors, and then after that, physical factors, and then after that, environmental factors. First, the biological factors, there are lots of them. We'll start with gender. Men, for example, are more likely than women to engage in physical aggression, direct aggression. Women are more likely to use relational aggression. Next biological factor, let's look in the brain. What parts of the brain are related to aggression? Many different parts, of course, but let's pinpoint the amygdala, which is in the lower part of the brain, the inner part of the brain, the limbic system, and that's where our impulses and emotions start from. And then secondly, the prefrontal cortex in the very front of the brain. That's the part that puts the brakes on, that helps control, that inhibits aggression. The amygdala, left and right, are important parts of the brain for fear and threat. So when we have an experience that is threatening or fearful, the amygdala becomes activated. Research on teenage boys shows that the boys who are the most aggressive show greater activity in the amygdala, the emotional impulsive area, and less activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain for reasoning and decision making that can put the brakes on, that can inhibit aggressional feelings coming from the lower brain. Here's another biological factor, testosterone. Testosterone is a hormone, which means it travels through the bloodstream in order to influence us. In men, it is produced in the testicles, in women in the ovaries and the adrenal glands. Men, on the average, have more testosterone in their blood than women at any one time or any one situation, but it does decrease with age. So older men have less testosterone. The amount of testosterone that you have in your blood at any one time is influenced by the circumstances, the situation that you're in. Competition increases testosterone in the blood, and testosterone in the blood increases aggression. On the other hand, cooperation reduces aggression. So we want to increase the amount of cooperation that people are involved in and reduce the amount of competition. Here we have two graphs that show that testosterone influences aggression. The large graph shows that preschool boys are more aggressive than girls, and especially boy-to-boy aggression. And then the smaller graph shows even that in animal studies, that aggression in rats is influenced by the amount of testosterone. An important part of the prefrontal cortex is the orbital frontal cortex, which is shown here. Testosterone reduces activity in this area, and this is an area that influences decision making. So when we have increases in testosterone, we have decreasing decision making ability. Lots of times you will hear that testosterone causes aggression. This is not really correct. Testosterone acts like the fuel. It's kind of like putting gas in your car. If you have gas in your car, then you can go fast if you choose to go fast. So testosterone acts as a fuel to enable a person to be aggressive. But there are other chemicals also that influence aggression. There are other hormones like cortisol. Low levels of cortisol are related to aggression. High levels of cortisol are related to non-aggression. And then neurotransmitters, brain chemicals, low levels of serotonin are related to aggression, and high, sometimes low levels of dopamine, depending upon other factors in the brain, can also be related to aggression. So aggression is influenced by many different brain chemicals and hormones. Here's a summary of aggression and brain chemicals. Testosterone activates the amygdala, which is the fear part of the brain, and reduces prefrontal controls. The prefrontal cortex is the controlling part. Cortisol helps prefrontal inhibition. Low serotonin makes it difficult for the prefrontal cortex to inhibit the amygdala. So the summary is that testosterone activates subcortical areas of the brain that enable aggression, while cortisol and serotonin act to reduce aggression. Another biological factor that is associated with aggression are genes, the genetic recipes that we inherit from our parents. These genes come in many different variations, and there's one gene that's getting a lot of attention lately called the warrior gene. This is a gene on the X chromosome that one variation of it known as MAOAL. L means low. It means low production of an enzyme called MAOA. And this is an enzyme that is a key for normal brain functioning. It's been discovered that people who have this genetic variation known as the warrior gene have extremely violent behavior. Now, be careful because we might think, oh, we can manipulate genes, but actually environmental cues for violent behavior are much easier to control than genes and would have much more widespread social benefits. People who have low levels of MAOA, the enzyme in the brain that is a key for regulating brain chemistry. When you have low levels, this is termed Brunner's syndrome. A number of people have been found with this syndrome, and they have high levels of aggression. The same thing has been found in animal models, like in mice, for example. So this gene by itself is not as significant as when it is seen in an adverse environment. That is, when people with Brunner's syndrome with the MAOAL warrior gene are in stressful situations, threatening situations, that's when they are likely to be violent. So look at the little pie chart here. When MAOA is low and you have an adverse environment, that's when you have a high probability of aggression. We talked about a lot of biological factors that influence aggression. Here are some physical factors, also biological, of course, but I'm just trying to divide them up into these different areas. Physical factors include epilepsy, other kinds of brain injuries or brain abnormalities, dementia, like Alzheimer's disease, any kind of psychosis that could involve paranoia, that could potentially lead to aggression, but be careful. Most people with the psychosis are not overly aggressive, not any more aggressive than anyone else. Drugs, and of course, alcohol. Alcohol is a hugely common drug that's used, and it is related to aggression. Next, let's list a few environmental factors or experience factors. For example, witnessing aggression leads to more aggression. So there's a famous study done by psychologist Albert Bandura. It is called the Bobo doll experiment. And what happened is when little children watched an adult acting aggressively, hitting and kicking a Bobo the clown doll, and then they were given an opportunity to play in a room with a Bobo the clown doll, they also acted aggressively in the same manner as the adults. Here is a picture of Albert Bandura, who did this very famous experiment with his colleagues way back in the 1960s. On the left, you see an example of the adult throwing the Bobo doll, and then on the right, you see the child imitating. This is called observational learning. So aggression can be learned through observation. Here are some still photographs from the Albert Bandura Bobo the Clown doll experiment. On the top row, you see still photos of the adult aggressively acting towards the Bobo doll. And then we see in the next row a little boy, and then in the bottom row, a little girl engaging in exactly the same aggressive behaviors that they saw the adult engage in. What is not shown in these is the use of a toy gun. The adult did not use a gun, but the children did. There was a toy gun in the room. They picked it up. They pointed it at the doll. They said very aggressive things, threatening things to the doll. So in psychology, we call this generalization. They learned aggression from witnessing the aggression by the adult, and then it generalized to the use of a gun and even to verbally threatening language. The Bobo doll experiment reminds us what a lot of people already know, that humans are very susceptible to imitation. We see something, we do it. This is how we learn language, for example, how we pick up things from other people, behaviors and speech and so on. And the same is true for mass shootings and school attacks. As many as 20% to 30% of shootings and school attacks are set off by other attacks. Here's another interesting environmental effect called the weapons effect. That is, studies have shown that just the sight of weapons, having a gun or a knife in the same room, increases aggression. So I like this quote by psychologist Leonard Berkowitz, who has studied aggression for many, many years. Guns not only permit violence, they can stimulate it as well. The finger pulls the trigger, but the trigger may also be pulling the finger. Many people ask about violent media. Is it good for children to watch violent media? And of course, people argue about this all the time. So let's look at the scientific evidence. The evidence is very strong that violent media is a risk factor. Of course, aggression is caused by multiple factors. So there are many, many things. Not everyone who watches violent media is going to be aggressive, but violent media is one of the risk factors that makes people more likely to engage in aggression. We also know from many, many different research studies and different types of design for research that homicide rates are much higher in the US because of easy access to guns, and that violent media is one of the contributing factors. Another environmental factor that psychologists have discovered is when you name mass killers. It encourages a competitive concept in other gunmen who will try to compete with and kill a greater number. It gives the killers some fame. It serves as an advertisement for copycat effects. So what we really recommend is that the media not name mass killers, don't show them, but report everything else. Here's an interesting concept that a lot of people don't know about called a social script or behavioral script. So if we watch, for example, violent media over and over and over again, our brain is learning what to do in a similar situation. This is called a behavioral script or a social script. It's like a movie script that our behaviors are guided by our previous experiences. So we have children who watch violent media over and over again, and then suddenly they're in a situation and they will revert to their social script. They will almost instinctively go with what they have experienced in the past. So this might be aggression or violence. One of the most studied and best known causes of aggression is frustration. Frustration is the feeling we have when a goal is blocked. We have a goal and something blocks it. This causes aggression. This is built into humans. We have to fight against this using our prefrontal cortex to think about it, to stop being aggressive. And by the way, aggression, when we're frustrated, is often displaced onto someone else, or you kick your dog, or you yell at your kids or something like that. So displaced aggression is quite common when people are frustrated. One of the really sad statistics about aggression and violence, 3 million children in the US are reported abused or neglected every year. You know, 80% of children that die from abuse are under the age of 4. About 2,000 children are killed by family members each year in the US. So we have this horrible problem of child abuse in the United States. The child maltreatment death rate in the US is 3 times that of Canada, 11 times that of Italy. It's a big problem in the US. We have to figure out how to solve that. One of the problems we have in the United States and also in other countries is this idea that spanking is acceptable and that children learn from spanking. In fact, spanking is a kind of aggression. It's harmful. Children who are spanked are more likely to defy adults. They have antisocial behavior. They have aggression. They have mental health disorders. They have lower academic achievement. They commit more crimes. So in general, spanking is harmful for children. It often has the opposite effect that parents want. And neuroscientists have found that spanked children show less gray matter in their brain, and they have problems with self-control and problem solving. So we really have to stop the spanking of children. There are other ways to help children develop appropriate behaviors. One of the effects of child abuse or aggression or trauma or violence is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But there's a new concept called complex PTSD or CPTSD, in which a person has had repeated trauma over months or years, just repeated rather than a single event. This is not currently in the DSM, the official book of psychiatric disorders, but it is a serious problem, and the term is being used quite often today. You see here a list of the symptoms of complex PTSD: uncontrolled feelings, jittery, nightmares, flashbacks, dissociation, feelings of shame and guilt. So we really need to be careful and to get treatment for people who are suffering from aggression or trauma. Let's get started on some ideas for reducing aggression. First of all, reduce stressors like frustration, discomfort, and provocation. Secondly, teach and model nonviolent responses. Anytime you're around people, you are a model. Other people will copy you. So whether it's adults or children, you should model non-aggressive behaviors, and other people will imitate, will copy you. Emphasize cooperation instead of competitiveness. Anytime you have cooperation, you're going to have less aggression. And then change the cost reward payoffs. Make non-aggression pay off. Make it worthwhile. Here is an ecological model that shows different levels of agency, all the way from the individual to the society, and things you can do, especially in relationships, that will help nonviolence. So for the individual, learn and model attitudes and behaviors that are healthy, respectful, and nonviolent. Within your relationships, give people skills to solve conflicts, manage their emotions, and respect others. Encourage people to intervene in a conflict to stop it from escalating. Within the community, implement bystander prevention strategies, and also partner with other groups across different sectors to foster relationships that are healthy, safe, and nonviolent. And as a society, create and promote policies supporting positive relationships and healthy sexuality. Enforce laws that protect, respect nonviolent relationships. Here is the ecological model again that just flipped left to right. So individual on the right, relationships, then community, then society. And at each level, there are some ideas here for what to do to reduce violence. So you might want to pause the video and look at these different ideas. And finally, we'll end this video with the spectrum of prevention, how to prevent aggression and violence. We have the little pyramid. We start at the bottom, strengthen individual knowledge and skills, then promote community education, and then educating the providers, the people who are going to be working with the public, and then fostering coalitions and networks, changing organizational practices, and finally at the top, influence policy and legislation that will reduce violence and aggression. Thank you very much for watching my video and for being interested in how to reduce aggression and violence in ourselves and in our society. And be sure to check out my other videos on my channel, Brucey. Bye.